Welcome to a special edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim O'Malley, and today we're going to pivot from our original plan. We're going to have a conversation with CBS Sports NFL draft analyst Chris Trapasso. We're going to do that next week because we had a bit of a scheduling conflict. And this is actually a well-timed pivot because we're going to talk about the 2025 Fighting Irish going into spring ball. And less than 24 hours ago, Notre Dame introduced not only new general manager Mike Martin, but also had head football athletic trainer Rob Hunt speak to the media, and he provided the most detailed injury report in the history of a press conference. Now, we're not going to get into that as much detail here. It's going to be written about all week at Irish Illustrated, and if you'd like a review of what happened yesterday, you can go to Thursday's normal Irish Illustrated Insider podcast with Tim Priester, Pete Sampson, John Bryce, and myself, and we did run down every injury in four different categories. But let's consider this a spring essay. And because a quarterback was part of the injury report in the fall, very brief injury report that we found out maybe we should have had a little more information on. We're going to start at the quarterback position. CJ Carr has been the talk of the offseason, of course. His injury was confirmed by Hunt that it occurred in practice. It was always going to be a 10 to 12 week plan. Well, that gets him back now for the spring. There are four players, three potential starters, and one tough choice to make this spring. That tough choice isn't who's going to start because I don't think they're coming up with the start of the spring. It's who's number three because Notre Dame knows well when they name a number one and two quarterback and tell the other guy you are 2B, you're fighting for number one, but you're 2B. There's a healthy sum out there that's going to allow either Kenny Minchey, Steve Angeli, or probably not CJ Carr to leave the program. So intrigue is what will happen prior to that. Carr, I think, best passing quarterback of the group. Curiosity is Kenny Minchey because he is the true dual threat. If you heard Riley Leonard speak at the NFL Draft Combine, Kenny Minchey is a little bit closer to him, of course, than the other two are. But I want to caution Notre Dame fans that write off Steve Angeli because his athletic gifts are not the same. If you were to ask Notre Dame's football team to name some captains right now, I have a feeling Steve Angeli would be one of them. I know the coaches feel that way, and that adds another layer to this quarterback competition. There really has not been a quarterback competition since 2022, and I think most people believe Tyler Buckner would win that over Drew Pine as he did. So quarterback, I think it comes down to what can Coach Gino Guidugli do to divvy up 33% of the first team reps among his three combatants, because you got to give them a fair shot. If one of them doesn't get a fair shot, that makes the choice for them. And I really think Guidugli wants to get a good look at all of them because remember, CJ Carr is probably going to be the best quarterback of this group. Is CJ Carr the best quarterback for Miami? Is he the best quarterback for September? That's what's going to have to come to fruition a little bit in the spring. I do not think you will hear about a starting quarterback until sometime early in August camp. Running back's an interesting spot for Jaywan Sider, the new running backs coach, because he has six guys on campus, including Jabron Payne, who Rob Hunt mentioned is back and healthy, ready to go. Jeremiah Love will be limited, of course, this spring. I think Jeremiah Love would be limited this spring, even if he wasn't on the official list to be limited. He had quite a battle going through post-injury at USC for 2 months of trying to play the highest level of football. I'm interested the most in the two-man crew of Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young because I really believe four guys could start on this Notre Dame team on, let's say, against last year's schedule, and Notre Dame could make the playoff again. I don't know if that's true for this year's schedule, but the intrigue around Williams as an all-around player and Kedron Young as kind of the outlier, a bit of a battering ram, and he's not a battering ram in the slow way. He's a battering ram in the I can't believe that guy runs that fast when he's that big realm. Obviously, a different guy than Audric Estime, not that powerful, a little more wiggle, but Kedron Young is my guy to watch this spring, and maybe at every offensive position other than quarterback. I don't think anyone's in Jeremiah Love's stratosphere among these running backs, but I do think that you can win with all of them. Can Sider keep four engaged? And I'm not including Nolan James, the freshman, in this because obviously he is not going to be heavily in the mix in the fall. But can you keep four engaged to the point where they don't seek greener pastures elsewhere? No pun intended, because it is going to be available to any of them. They're that good, and they're that good on tape. Wide receiver, I think it's a spot where it's about who's not there or who is limited as much as anything else. We know Jordan Faison will barely participate in the spring because of lacrosse, and he can't take a lot of contact. Now, not that Matt Jeffrey is on the same level as Jordan Faison, but Matt Jeffrey will not participate in the spring because of lacrosse as well. That's not a surprise. We found out yesterday there is a surprise that Will Pauling, coming in from Wisconsin, who is going to be a major factor this spring, recovering from surgery, right fifth metatarsal. He'll be involved in the latter half of the spring, but he will be not involved in teamwork at the beginning of the spring. You have Malachi Fields in the Bo Collins situation from last spring, or Malachi Fields will join the team. He can be around the team. He cannot practice. He cannot be part of that until the summer session begins. And then Jaden Greathouse is on a bit of a pitch count. Jaden Greathouse is one of about 10 guys Rob Hunt mentioned, 10 starters Rob Hunt mentioned, that had a very long season because of January. Of course, Jaden Greathouse broke out in January to the point where the College Football Network listed Jaden Greathouse as the 54th best player in America, which that was humanly impossible 2 weeks prior against Georgia, and then he was rated there. He's obviously, I don't know if he's 54th in America, but he's a very important piece of this. But I just mentioned four starters for next season: Faison, Greathouse, Pauling, and Fields. Three of them will barely or not at all participate this spring. It is a wide open competition for the younger guys. Instead of listing all seven, I just want to highlight two. I think this gives Logan Saldate in the slot a huge chance because Jaden Greathouse starts in the slot. Will Pauling was going to compete in the slot. If you're going to rotate, Jordan Faison was the guy to rotate into the slot, the former starting slot receiver. It's open there for Saldate, and he's the guy that Mike Denbrock all last fall, when you tried to press him about receivers like Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert, he would always bring up Saldate. So now it's time to see him work in the spring with three new quarterbacks. And then, of course, the guy we kind of lost track of last year, Micah Gilbert, he was the darling of August camp. We thought maybe he's going to make them go to a seven deep receiver situation. They did not. He got some playing time and garbage time, and obviously he had one very memorable drop that is not, I don't think, indicative of Micah Gilbert, the player. But Micah Gilbert, if he's the boundary wide receiver, that's where Malachi Fields is slated to start. So Gilbert has a chance to run a lot with the ones and three different quarterbacks. It's an intriguing group of young players, but I think they're looking for two players from this group of seven, includes three incoming enrollee freshmen, to join the four obvious quote-unquote starters for the offseason, and that gives you the six-man rotation. The day they go above a six-man rotation, I think, is when the offense has to change, because I just don't think you can rotate that heavily, unless, of course, you play 16 games again. Now, tight end, it's always been a bare bones position in the spring. I think it was 2 springs ago, it might have been 3, where there were two healthy tight ends. It was Mitchell Evans and Holden Stays, and nobody else was able to run around out there at all. It's a position where they are heavily involved in special teams all fall. They're heavily involved in blocking and short yardage situation, and of course they have their snap counts as regular receiving tight ends. It becomes surgery season for the spring, and right now there's 4 scholarship tight ends. Kevin Bauman's one of them. Of course, this is his 6th year. He is back in the group. But the highlight here is Eli Raridan. It is, we say, who's now or never this spring, and it's always overstated by us in the offseason. Offseason fodder goes away. Eli Raridan's a true senior. It doesn't seem like it. He has burned all 3 years of eligibility leading into his 4th year. It is officially now or never for Eli Raridan. But the unique thing is he cannot be overused in the spring either, because obviously he was heavily involved in January's run. He has to be the man this year because Cooper Flanagan, Rob Hunt confirmed, he called the Achilles injury an 8 to 10 month recovery. That is probably true. We heard the same about Jadarian Price, but remember, Price injured his Achilles a couple years ago in July. He did make it back for August camp. Cooper Flanagan injured his Achilles in January. I don't think you see Cooper Flanagan. It wouldn't be prudent probably to see him playing in a football game next year in the playoff. Now, he can, of course, work his way back in a situation, but Ty Washington from Louisville is in the same situation as Fields. He is joining the team. He cannot participate in the spring due to graduation requirements with Arkansas. So it is a smallish group at tight end, as Tim Priester mentioned on our podcast yesterday. Probably moving some guys in there for bodies. Justin Fisher's an option with a walk-on from Mishawaka. I'm interested to see how they use tight ends because you have to give Raridan a break. You can't overwork him, but he is also should be the main receiving tight end for all these quarterbacks. You have to find some form of connection between your top players and these quarterbacks because the top receivers are not often participating this spring. Now, part of the injury news we received that surprised us yesterday was that Anthony Knapp won't be totally full go because of ankle surgery. Suffered in the Georgia game, broken ankle. I thought Knapp would be back. I was just wrong. I thought Knapp would be back and would be working at center with Ashton Craig out. Obviously, Ashton Craig injured in the Purdue game. Prognosis for Craig is he'll be easily ready to go in the summer, but of course the spring that would keep him out of action. So you'll be looking at a new center entirely for these new quarterbacks. It basically boils down to with all the injuries, and it's mostly reserve players, except Billy Schrauth had cleanup surgery on his ankle. So Schrauth was a full participant in winter conditioning. He's going to take a pause to quote Rob Hunt here in the spring, cleanup surgery on that ankle. I think that opens the doors for a few people. And number one, of course, Gerby Lambert at left tackle. There is no Knapp to work against. Emil Wagner seems set at right tackle. With Gerby Lambert at left tackle, he's going to get as many reps as he needs to be the starting left tackle next year at Miami. Opens the door for him, but even more so, a guy that is a maybe the so-called seventh starter going into the spring if everybody were healthy, someone that John Bryce has been very high of on our Irish Illustrated Insider podcast. Sullivan Absher finally settled in at guard last year as a reserve guard instead of tackle. I think he has a great opportunity now because Billy Schrauth's spot on the left side is wide open for him to work as a first team guard. Now, obviously, people wonder where will Charles Jagasa work. It seems to me he would work at right guard where he could become a dominant player. If he works at left tackle, then Gerby Lambert doesn't have as easy of a spot. I'm not sure Joe Rudolph thinks the way fans and analysts do, but it seems that the closest point between easiest way to get 2 points is a straight line. I would put Gerby Lambert straight to that left tackle position and Charles Jagasa at right guard. It seems like that would be the best way to find the top five. Interesting note, I think, is that Charles Jagasa was not on the very extensive list of the walking wounded, so to speak, for Rob Hunt in the spring. Now he had the benefit of not playing for 4 full months, and of course going through. He mentioned he was sore as hell in January because he was not in football shape, but he was put out there against the best defensive players in the country. So Charles Jagasa should have full work this week, or excuse me, this month in spring ball, and I think he needs it because as good as he is, remember he was going to be a first-time starter that had played one game last year going into the season. Well, now he's a playoff veteran, and I think that settling in at right guard might be his best spot for the 2025 Irish. Want to wrap up the offense with three thoughts. Number one is I really don't believe that you will hear that even if a quarterback is fantastic this spring, head and shoulders above the rest, I don't think you're publicly going to hear a quarterback be named in the spring. I can't remember the last time there was a quarterback competition and a quarterback was named in the spring. I mean, they didn't even say with Riley Leonard and Sam Hartman, and we already knew who the quarterbacks were. So I think you're going to hear that early in August. I have a guess for a spring star. It's going to be, whether true or not for the fall, Saldate or Micah Gilbert getting the most ink, but I think the true spring star will be from the Williams-Young running back group because I think they're going to get more time with Love out. I don't think you want to overwork Jadarian Price either. And I think that guy, the Williams-Young player, will be the spring star. We always have somebody that's the standout of the spring. I think he'll be the one that actually plays the biggest role in the fall. Last year's spring star, I want to point out, was Jaden Greathouse. It did not look good for us when we called him the spring star until right around the domination of Penn State to win the game and the best game of his life there in the second half against Ohio State. So spring star, if the spring star is next year's January star again, that'll be really good for the Irish because that's exactly when you want to star, mid to late January these days. And then finally, I think the story is, can Lambert solidify left tackle? If he's the starting left tackle, I think that is the best possible starting five for Notre Dame going into next season. Switching gears to defense, the defensive line, interestingly enough, it's similar to wide receiver because it's about who's not available, who's not there. Not there, of course, are Jordan Botelho and Boubacar Traore, who tore ACLs in September. We had a all-time glowing review for Jordan Botelho's recovery by Rob Hunt, and we had a very positive review for Boubacar Traore too. They are both supposed to be ready to roll in the summer. I'm shocked by that. I'm a pessimist, so when you say you're ready to roll in the summer instead of August camp, that makes me think you actually can be a football player in August camp. When someone says he'll be ready by August camp, I think to myself, yeah, but you're going to be managing every rep he has. He's not really going to be in shape, just like Mitchell Evans was last year. I think that's when we heard about Mitchell Evans, he was out there day one of camp, but then you had to manage him for the next 30 days. If Botelho and Traore are ready to go, in the summer. That's great news for Notre Dame on the edges because Josh Burnham and Bryce Young are two of the January heroes that will be having a very light spring. So what does that mean? I just named four defensive ends from two sides. It means Logan Thomas at Viper and Junior Halamaka at Viper. The latter was the season saver last year. Remember that. I know he's on no one's list this year, but Junior Tui Halamaka solidified that spot last year, and he helped win the Georgia game as well with the sack herd around the world. Uh, I think that those two guys can have a really big spring. I know Logan Thomas is more of a fan curiosity than Tui Halamaka ever could be as a true senior, but that is some serious depth at defensive end. And there was a question put on the board, could Tui Halamaka move positions because of this depth? I don't know where he would go, but I just think that if Notre Dame is planning on 15, 16 game seasons, as everybody listening to this hopes they are, you probably need all these guys because they would have looked awfully good bringing in fresh rushers against Ohio State in that game instead of getting stoned on the edges. The big news, of course, is that Jason Onye is back. If he is an interview subject this spring, it will be the most populated interview since Riley Leonard's first interview. I think people are dying to talk to Onye, who was always great with the media. Onye's back. It makes for a bit of a potential, maybe a five-man rotation inside with Gabriel Rubio, of course, Jared Dawson from Louisville, Elijah Hughes from USC, and the forgotten man, Donovan Heinisch. I'll get to him in a second. Those are the five guys I think you will see battling inside all spring. Can some of the younger players finally step up? Is it now or never for them, or is it they're destined for third string status? I am on the Sean Sevillano because of his size. If he could be in shape, can help you bandwagon. But of course, we have to see the shape he is in. It's he's a guy that just had to totally reshape his body coming in, and now he'll be going into year two. Player of intrigue is Jared Dawson from Louisville. He is actually used to rotating. I found looking back at his film and his snap counts, Louisville is a heavy rotation up front. Dawson had one of his better games against Notre Dame. I'm sure that caught the Irish staff's eye. He's the most intriguing guy to watch. You want to caution everybody though, like when Javante Jean-Baptiste came in, and then of course RJ Oben as well. It's different when you're a graduate student coming into a new program, a defensive line. You have to learn a whole new way of doing everything. So Jared Dawson, early August, probably more important than Jared Dawson late spring, if you want to be honest about this. One prediction from the defensive line, and I'm looking at Jack Freeman, our producer, watching me right now. No one wants to hear it. Donovan Heinisch will be the most talked about productive player in the spring by the Notre Dame defensive coaching staff because he does everything right. He only has one issue. He's 285 pounds instead of 315 pounds. But Donovan Heinisch, I know the final game of his 2024 season was not the same as his playoff run. He was outstanding against Georgia and Indiana. Donovan Heinisch is my pick to click this spring. It's just not a fancy pick to click this spring. They can't all be freshmen. There is a freshman linebacker, of course, Madden Framo, and he's going to get a chance because for some extra reps because both Drake Bowen and Jalen Sneed are on what I'm dubbing the take it easy list this spring. That basically means when Irish Illustrated is at practice and Bowen and Sneed are not heavily involved, or Greathouse or Love or all these guys aren't heavily involved, they're not injured. They have a plan to take some of the stress that was endured in January off of them this spring. So Madden Framo should get more reps than he would have with, of course, the full boat of linebackers involved. It is now or never for Preston Zinter, who I know linebacker coach Max Bulla loves. He spoke so glowingly of him when when I brought up Zinter's name before the Georgia game when we had a full group, and I talked to Zinter in Atlanta as well. I don't know if he's the fifth wheel here, but this really opens the door for Zinter to get some more work. He could be a special teams captain, of course, if he doesn't seek greener pastures in terms of he could go start somewhere as well. Also on the list, I'm going to skip KVA, Kingston Vialamu Asa, because I have a prediction for him at the end of this segment. Also on the list of taking it easy a little bit is going to be, and brace yourselves, Irish fans, for the secondary, Christian Gray, Leonard Moore, and Adon Schuler. So everybody else, basically everybody but Xavier Watts, who's not there anymore, is on the take it easy list because of all the snaps they endured in January. Devontae Smith from Alabama is listed as a cornerback. He is, of course, going to be the starting nickel. I think he's listed as a corner because Notre Dame has way more safeties than they have corners. And Gray and Moore are taking it easy this spring, or having their lefts limited this spring. The big surprise, and this opens a door, was that Jalen Stroman from Virginia Tech had to have surgery. He will not be fully involved this spring. He had to have his clavicle repaired. It was why he missed part of a season at Virginia Tech. It did not fully heal. He has to have surgery. Or excuse me, he already had surgery. And Adon Schuler is also on the got to monitor his reps list. So the two projected starting safeties won't be in there often, Strowman not until the end. That means these guys, fan favorites, and for good reason. Luke Talich, who excels on special teams and had the 79-yard interception touchdown, of course, to highlight the Florida State game. Kennedy Urlacher, who went in for one half and became the most famous Urlacher of all time for a nice 25 minutes. Jack Freeman, the Bears fan, watching me say this. Kennedy Urlacher was fantastic in that one half against Purdue. I know it was Purdue, but now Urlacher gets a shot. And I assume Tay Johnson, who they moved from safety to corner, could rotate to see if they could find a spot for one of the best athletes on the team. They all mentioned Tay Johnson as one of the best athletes on the team. Finally, I guess it's spring fodder, so we have to mention the tallest guy you've ever seen in a football uniform, Jadon Blair. No, he's Jadon Blair casts a shadow when he's out there, and I am interested to see the chance he will get with the starters basically out this spring. But Jadon Blair, the tough thing is it's a new defense. He kind of got exposed to the defense a little bit in December and January when he came in early, and now it's a new defense with Chris Ash. Almost all defenses are safety-driven defenses, whether they say it or not, like Chris O'Leary used to. It's tough for a freshman to learn that, and he doesn't have Xavier Watts to tutor him the entire time. Now, why did I not mention Kingston Viliamu-Asa? That will be the MVP of spring. He will be everyone's top 5 player on Irish Illustrated when we do our lists in the summer. He will be your top 5 player when you do your list in the summer. I had him ranked number 9, which seems, I guess, a little too high. My numbers had Kingston Viliamu-Asa number 9 on the team last year, way higher than anybody else did. I probably should have made him about number 10 or 11, but I'm that high on him. I think he will be the true breakout player of Notre Dame's football season, and you will see him this spring. We're to the point where he is so good, they will decide, all right, it's time to start limiting his reps a little bit too. Remember, Viliamu-Asa missed a couple of games and worked there late in the season, so he did not endure all the reps that the other guys did in November and December. He kind of worked his way back slowly. He actually didn't even play in the IU game. So one of the biggest changes, though, without Strowman out there, it makes me think of the Rod Hurd, Adon Schuler situation from last year. We all pictured Rod Hurd coming in to start next to Xavier Watts for the veteran smart group. Well, Adon Schuler just seized that role in the spring. Nothing Hurd could do about it. He wasn't practicing. I think Strowman needs to get back sooner rather than later because Talich is a talented player. Urlacher, if he knows where he's going, is a absolute guided missile. The problem is I don't think he was always guided. Otherwise, he would have been playing a lot more for Notre Dame in mop-up roles. Remember, he barely got in from scrimmage. He did play special teams. And then the talent of Blair and Johnson behind him. I think Strowman is kind of on the clock in terms of he needs to be out there. I think you can learn from Rod Hurd if you're Jalen Strowman. I think it's important for him to find his way back at least late. Now, we're going to go into detail every position group. I encourage you just to read it at irishillustrated.com. I started yesterday with a spring prospectus on quarterbacks, so if you didn't hear your player mentioned, if you want more drilling down details, I will have every position group coming up over the next 9 days. But in addition to the 3 predictions, no QB is named. KVA will be everyone's top 5 going into the fall. And also, I have one down note because we always have down notes here at Irish Illustrated when I'm talking. We have to work in reality a little bit. The absence of the starting receivers will impact the passing game in September with a new quarterback. I think it always does. And I think we like to overlook those things in the spring and say, well, they can get it all back in the summer. But you're not going to find your starting quarterback. You can't give him starters reps this spring. You probably can't give him starters reps to start August camp. I think you will see the result. If you're looking for a downside right now, you will see the result of a quarterback competition brewing for the next 3 or 4 months and wide receivers being out for various reasons. I think that could hamper Notre Dame a little bit in September. Always fun to leave on a down note, but thank you very much for listening to this special edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. We'll be back Monday with the full crew, and then I believe next Tuesday with Chris Trapasso, who is the CBS Sports NFL draft analyst. Conversation on Notre Dame's draft hopefuls, not only 8 combine guys, but I want to ask him about the likes of Jordan Clark as well. I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for listening.